Welcome to the Cold Steel Surgical Podcast with your hosts Amir Farouk and Chad Ball.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Cold Steel Podcast. We hope your 2026 is going beautifully, and we're excited to bring you a whole host of new content this year. You probably have seen that we've been able to post a lot of new webinars from our partners at Evidence-Based Reviews in Surgery, or otherwise known as EBRS. This is a fantastic place where we've done journal club reviews, and there's a bunch of modules on the website at ebrs.online. These are incredibly valuable for keeping on track with the latest in surgical research, as well as exploring really important topics in research methodology. One of the favorite webinars that I've done so far or been part of is the webinar that we did with the authors of the challenge trial. And this was the trial that was looking at the role of structured exercise after adjuvant chemotherapy for colon cancer. This was a huge paper, and it showed that exercise basically had the equivalent effects to chemotherapy. Anyways, check out all those webinars. Check out all the content that we are posting on our YouTube channel. We're really looking to expand into our YouTube channel, so stay tuned to that. If you're an audio-only listener, I would highly suggest that you check out our YouTube channel. We wanted to do something a little bit different this week for this episode, and that's because it's that time of the year again. You can almost smell the anticipation, the anxiety, the dread, the working and the racking of the heart and the head. Yes, it's almost time for final year Canadian medical students to submit their rank list to CaRMS. So for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what CaRMS is the Canadian the Canadian Resident Matching Service. So in Canada, medical students must apply to residency programs that they hope to spend the rest of their lives at and the rest of their career at. I shouldn't say that. I hope no one spends the rest of their lives at the residency program. But in any case, CaRMS is where medical students have to apply at the end of their medical school, so in their final year, and then eventually that program, CaRMS, will match them with the residency program of their choosing. So for many medical students, this year is a year that's filled with electives where they go across the country, basically auditioning with 2 to 4 week electives in the specialty and the location of their choosing. And then in November, medical students submit their applications to all the residency programs that they're interested in. So for me in 2013, that was something like 25 different programs that I applied to because at the time I was interested in both vascular and general surgery. I had to upload all the reference letters, my personal statement, my transcripts, my CV, and then click submit and sit on my hands and nervously await for interviews. So like my experience, it's the same this year for medical students. In January, the interviews are all conducted. Obviously in 2026, all those interviews now are done remotely and virtually. When I went through the process, we actually started in Vancouver and flew all the way across the country. And so by the time we got to Newfoundland, we felt like professional interviewers. We'd given so many interviews across that month of January. The residency matching process is a very unique thing to medicine, and you don't really see it in any other professional program such as law or engineering. It's fascinating to actually explore some of the history of the matching service. And the reason why I'm getting to this is that what I really wanted to explore this episode on the podcast is some advice for medical students who are creating their rank list, because this is a very anxious time. It's a tough time, and you really have to think really hard and long about the decision that you're about to make, because it has implications for the rest of your career. So I wanted to explore some of the tips that we had for students who are about to make their rank list, but we thought it'd be helpful to actually explore some of the history behind the matching service, because again, there's some insight there into how you should actually create your rank list if you kind of understand the history around it. So in the early 1900s, it was total chaos for medical students when they were trying to secure an internship. There was no formalized process. And so residency programs would often approach medical students as early as after their second year, because they tried to snatch up the best and brightest medical students. And so medical students would have to accept offers before they knew what else was in the works. If they did not accept an offer, a medical student might lose out completely and not even get a spot. Medical students wrote letters throughout the years at that time, asking that programs coordinate and send out their offers all at the same time. But this was totally in vain. So in 1945, however, the Association of Medical Colleges adopted the cooperative plan, where programs would release all of their offers on the same day. But in fact, this actually exacerbated issues in many respects, because students would increasingly have to make prompt decisions, because the programs would send out their offers and then they would have to get a response immediately, because otherwise they would lose out on their desired candidates and they would end up being left with their least desired candidates. And so medical students would actually have to accept an offer on the spot. Like, they would not be able to hang up the phone without accepting their spot. So finally, in 1950, F.J. Mullen, who is the dean of the University of Chicago School of Medicine, proposed a clearinghouse. And what would happen is that medical students would submit their rank order list and hospitals would submit their rank order list. And then this clearinghouse, or this matching service, would then match medical students at their top ranked hospitals. And basically the way that the algorithm worked is that it would first match all the hospitals and students with their first choices, so 1-to-1 rankings. And then hospitals would be matched with students in their second group if those students had ranked the hospitals first. So once they had done the 1-to-1 matches, they would do the 2-to-1 rankings, followed by the matches of hospitals' first choices with students' second choices, 1-to-2 rankings, and so on. And the idea was to try to give an advantage to students, because when the preferences conflicted, students' first choices were considered earlier than the hospital's first choices. The problem with this strategy was that if a medical student ranked a hospital first but had no chance of matching at that hospital, they might miss out completely on a spot at their second ranked hospital, because all the spots would have been filled in the 2-to-1 round, for example. So a medical student might match to a hospital that she liked very little, despite the fact that that second ranked hospital might have ranked her first. And what's interesting is that by the time the 1980s rolled around, fewer and fewer people are actually going into the match, were actually participating in the match. And partly that's because medical students looked very different than when that clearinghouse was first developed in the 1950s. In particular, there were a lot more women who were also going through the match. And in particular, there were more couples that were formally going through the match as a couple. Up until that point, up until the 1980s, what couples would do is they would actually have to go to their dean's office. They would have to be formally certified as a couple. And then one of the people in that couple would actually have to be designated as the lead person. And that lead person would then go through the match first. They would go through the match as an individual. And once they had matched to their position, then and only then, the second person in that couple would then go through the ranking process, but within that city where the lead person had matched. So in other words, if someone had, the lead person in the couple had matched to a hospital in Boston, then all the other rankings for that second person outside of Boston would be eliminated, and they'd have to find somewhere within Boston. So you can imagine this didn't lead to very good matches for couples. And so many couples were finding other ways to get matched, and they were picking up the phone and just calling residency programs and participating outside of the match. And of course, that had knock-on effects for folks that were in the match, because suddenly residency programs, if they accepted the couple, would have to withdraw an offer to someone they'd already made an offer to. And so by the 1980s, the rates of participation in the match were dropping. So it's at this point that Alvin Roth enters the picture. Alvin Roth is an economist at Stanford, and his main interest was in matching markets. A matching market is one where prices do not primarily serve as the coordinating mechanism. Instead, participants seek mutually beneficial arrangements based on preferences and affinities. So Alvin Roth was interested in matching markets already, and so he was called in to redesign the algorithm. His key insight was to actually redesign algorithms to try to create stable matches. And so a stable match is a match where both pairs prefer each other to another matching. An unstable match is one where, for example, a student and a hospital are not matched to each other, but would prefer each other over their existing match. He also redesigned the match process for couples and created an algorithm that would consider a pair of people rather than individuals. So this really got rid of this whole issue around people missing out on their second-ranked hospital because of the mathematics and the way that Alvin Roth redesigned the algorithm. So what am I getting to here? The important implication here is that you should not try to game the system. So you should, in other words, not try to guess which program ranks you highly and then somehow try to rank them higher on your rank list in this mistaken idea that that's going to give you a higher chance of matching there. Just as an aside, before we get on to some of the advice that we have around making a rank list, Alvin Roth actually ultimately went on to use many of his matching theories or matching market algorithms to other matching processes, and specifically kidney donation. So Roth noted that one of the big challenges with kidney donation is that it's often difficult to find a match with a compatible donor. So your brother might be willing to donate you his kidney, but if it isn't a match, it doesn't really help you out much. But with his background in matching markets, Roth developed this idea of a paired exchange. So in this scenario, your brother would donate his kidney to someone that he was compatible with, and the brother or the sister or the other family member of the other match, the other couple, would donate their kidney to you. And you can imagine, to make this possible, a large national database had to be developed so that you could identify possible matches. So this idea of what we call a paired exchange or a paired donation increased the ability to find matches tremendously. So the longest kidney chain to date was chain 357. And that involved 70 surgeries with 35 transplants and involved 25 different transplant centers. And ultimately, Alvin Roth, for all his work in matching markets, won a Nobel Prize in 2012. I know many of you are sitting there thinking, like, for all the mathematics around this, it still feels terrible to have to submit your life's decisions to a computer, to this faceless computer, and then just sit on your hands and wait until it spits out a decision. It's like nothing else in any other professional field. If you're a lawyer, you apply to a bunch of firms, you get some offers, and then you decide which one you want to go to. And that's not how it works for Canadian medical students. It's kind of like waiting to find out if Skynet from the Terminator movies is going to nuke Los Angeles. Having said that, now you understand a little bit more about how the matching process works. So maybe you have a little bit more faith in the mathematics and the underlying mechanisms around how it works. And if you're at all interested in learning more about it, I'll post the link to Alvin Roth's lecture that he gave at Stanford a few years ago that actually explained some of the mathematics around how the match process actually works. But I wanted to get to the meat of this episode, and that is some of our advice for when you're trying to create your rank list. So I'll just put all the caveats and disclaimers up front. This is my own personal advice. It's not meant to represent my institution or my residency program. These are my personal thoughts. It's also not meant to be taken as professional advice. Also, I will say that this is designed for applicants who are actually interested in applying and practicing clinical medicine. In other words, if you're going to spend the rest of your, or the majority of your life doing research, then maybe some of these advices don't really apply to you. And I also want to give a big shout out to some of the physicians and folks on the Physician Financial Independence group on Facebook. There were some really, really thoughtful suggestions when I posed this question to them. The first piece of advice that I have is be true to yourself. As Hamlet said, "This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man." So I know it sounds like a truism, but it is surprising how often that folks lie to themselves and to the residency programs that they're applying to. There's actually a great article published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal that's called "Teaching Medical Students to Lie" by Tara Young. And basically her argument in that paper is that in order for medical students to get a chance at their best spot, they will craft many different applications, all of which say that that specialty is their top choice, even if they have a second specialty that they're applying to. And they'll also say that whatever program they're applying to is their top choice, even though they may not actually rank that choice their top choice. Now, I'm not sure that I totally agree with Dr. Young. I think there's really high stakes in going unmatched through CaRMS. And, as such, I don't blame folks for trying to play the game, so to speak, and to spin a story. I also think that, sometimes people are not totally sure where they want to go to when they're doing their applications. It's possible that you might be torn. I certainly was torn between doing vascular surgery and general surgery. And so, I'm not sure that that's really lying and that the CaRMS process is teaching folks to lie. But I do think there's some kernel of truth in what Dr. Young is saying, in that ultimately at the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself. And you do have to at some point make a list, and you have to decide what it is that you really want to do with your life. And really, it's really dangerous to make those decisions based on prestige, for example, or because you think a specialty or a certain residency program seems really cool, or that you think your friends and your family will be impressed by you, or even because you really like the mentors in that specialty. Ultimately, someday, you're going to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning doing your 10th consult. And it's at that moment that you really need to know that you want to do that specialty. And it doesn't matter what residency program you're in. Even if you're in a program that doesn't have a lot of in-house call, you're not up at 2 in the morning doing your 15th consult, you still are going to have to spend a lot of time reading, learning, seeing patients. And so it's a demanding process. It's going to take a lot of time and energy. So at some point, you got to be honest with yourself. What is it that you want? Why are you doing it? And make your decision based on those core values and principles that you have. What is your personal mission? What are you trying to achieve? What do you want to do? So be true to yourself when you're making this list. My second piece of advice and second piece of sort of second consideration to take into account when you're making a rank list is that volume of clinical work trumps almost everything. Now, I will say that in Canada, virtually every place that you go to, you're going to become out, a Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, or a Canadian, or a College of Physicians, Family Physicians certified practitioner, and you're going to be trained very well. I mean, we're very lucky in Canada to have relatively homogenous and really high quality training programs. Having said that, there are individual differences, and looking for the volume of work that you're going to do, especially if you go into a procedural specialty, is critical. And partly, I've always felt like this, and this has really been reinforced by some of the books I've been reading. In particular, I've been reading this book by a guy named Cal Newport. Cal Newport is a computer scientist at Georgetown University, and he's done a lot of great work and written a lot of great books about the idea of living a deep life. He has a great podcast as well, and I'll put all the links to his books and podcasts in the show notes. One of his books I've been reading recently is called So Great They Can't Ignore You. And the basic premise of the book is that one of the keys to having a rewarding career is developing really high levels of skills and expertise. In other words, if you want to be really fulfilled at your career as a physician, there is no better way to do that than to just be really good at what you do. And this couldn't be more important than in a procedural specialty. So if you're doing procedures, you got to go to a place where you're going to be able to do a high volume of cases. So ask the programs for their logbooks and their rotation schedules. Figure out what the ratio is of fellows to residents. Are there opportunities to go do community centers and do high volume clinical work? Because I guarantee you, you're never going to leave residency and say, oh man, I wish I had done fewer cholecystectomies in residency. You always are going to feel like you should have done more and seen more in training. So volume trumps virtually everything. A corollary to that, and this is my tip number 3, is don't make work-life balance per se your number one priority. Residency is tough. That's the reality. It does get better when you become an attending, don't worry. But the years of training, they are tough. And it's because you're in this zone of proximal development where you're not comfortable all the time. Hopefully you're not totally out in the boonies feeling overwhelmed, but you're not going to be comfortable during residency because you're constantly learning new things, learning new skills. By the way, I'm not saying that you should go to a place where it's toxic or you're going to be demeaned. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I think if you put your work-life balance as your number one priority, at the end of your training, it may not get you the results that you want. You want to go to a place where you can come out really, really well trained. All right. Advice number 4. While I said work-life balance wasn't the number one priority, I think location does really matter. And many folks on the Physician Financial Independence group reiterated that. And I think it's a good point. Especially if you want to work in a certain area, or if you have a support network in a particular location, that can make your residency a lot easier and more bearable. If you have family, if you have friends, that can make a huge difference in getting you through the really tough and dark days that inevitably come when you're going through a residency program. So do pay attention to the location. The vast majority of people who train in a certain area end up staying somewhere in that area. So it is worthwhile thinking about location up front. Often the location will trump all the other bells and whistles that residency programs have. So volume and location are super important. The last thing I'm going to say is just listen to your gut. It was interesting reading all the responses on the Facebook group from the Physicians Financial Independence group. And so many people had done the same thing that I had done, where we had made these very sophisticated lists during the CaRMS process with all these different tables, good, bad, looking at weighing different factors. I had all these different ranking things that I had done for the different programs. But universally, at the end of the day, you just rip that list up, throw it up in the air, and whichever one you're hoping that your list will land on, when it lands, that's where you should go. You got to listen to your gut, because things really will work out in the end. And I know that going unmatched is it's really tough. So just for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what going unmatched means, about 1% of Canadian medical students who go through the match will not get matched any program. Often it's because folks have applied to a really, really competitive specialty, and there just aren't enough spots for the number of applicants. And so then you have to enter a second iteration of the match to try to scramble and find a spot that's open to you. The vast majority of the time, things work out okay. Even if you didn't become a dermatologist or a plastic surgeon or whatever it is that you wanted to become, things work out okay. You'll still become a physician. You'll still become a doctor the vast majority of the time, and things will work out okay. But what I was getting to when I was saying listen to your gut is that, at the end of the day, whatever you're feeling attracted to, wherever you felt like you're going to fit in, wherever you're really, I hate to use this millennial term, but wherever you vibe, that's where you should go. You should really take that gut feeling, that gut instinct that you have, and listen to it, because I think it serves most people really, really well. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think. Would love to hear your thoughts and comments. Good luck to everyone going through the match process. Send me an email at podcast.cjs@gmail.com. Good luck with everything. We'll see you the next week. Bye. You've been listening to Cold Steel, the official podcast of the Canadian Journal of Surgery. If you have comments or questions, please email us at podcast.cjs@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.